My name is John Clark, otherwise known as Posture Monster John, and I am the author of Psychedelics, Chronic Pain, and the Posture-Delic Hypothesis. Oh, apparently I need to mute my my live stream here that I have open so I can see the comments. There we go. And let's see. So this is the live Q&A where you can ask your questions about applications of psychedelics towards chronic pain. You can ask about posture therapy. You can ask questions about just chronic pain in general or psychedelics in general. This is a live Q&A with me. So if you're curious about me or why I'm talking about psychedelics and chronic pain, well, that's because I have successfully used them, not only in my life to help with chronic pain issues, but I have also now begun helping other people use psychedelics to use or to achieve pain relief in unconventional ways. Now, the big thing I want to stress about this type of therapy, the psychedelic assisted posture therapy that I cover in this book, is that we are not using the psychedelics in a capacity for like as a traditional painkiller, meaning that with the technique I describe in this book, we are not taking psychedelics on a daily basis. So we're not doing what is called microdosing, and we are not relying on psychedelics to just numb pain. Now, many people do experience an analgesic effect with psychedelics such as psilocybin or DMT or LSD or MDMA, which isn't technically a psychedelic, but that's something to think about later. And now the what we are really going for is the different effects that psychedelics have on the brain that are not directly related to killing pain, actually. For instance, the primary mechanism of action of the technique I've developed, the psychedelic assisted posture therapy, or posture-delic therapy, as I call it, is uh, we're going for making the body schema models that are in your brain more pliable and easy to change. So, body schema models are the structures and like both physical and data structures in your brain that define how your body moves and your sense of proprioception, how you're situated with respect to gravity and your environment, and a huge number of other things. It's involved with how we experience pain. It's involved with uh, our posture. So our posture can be thought of as a cumulative physical manifestation of body schema models in the brain. And what posture therapy does is chip away at these body schema models over time, kind of like chipping off pieces of granite. So if you think about how ancient cultures were making these big monolithic monuments, well, they were having to chip away at over periods of time, right? And uh, I'm getting messages here. I'm wondering. And now the stream's going again. Sorry about that. I had to make sure that things were working. Sorry about that. Had to make sure that the stream was going, make sure things was going. I think I paused there for a moment, but uh, so I was talking about body schema models in the brain and how posture therapy chips away at these at these models over time, and how then psychedelics make these models instead of like having to chip away at them like granite. Psychedelics make it so we can sculpt these body schema models kind of more like clay, and it makes it easier for us to achieve rapid results. Now, what I have seen in practice, both in my personal experience and facilitating this type of service for other people, is that you can get the equivalent of several months of posture therapy potentially in a few hours. And we're able to achieve this massive compression of how quickly we can achieve results because the our brain isn't resisting the postural changes. Normally, our brain is trying to enforce its models is what it thinks, how our brain is supposed to be controlling our body, is trying to enforce those. And posture therapy is trying to change what your brain thinks it's supposed to be doing, right? And psychedelics make it so that that threshold that we need in order to change these models, this threshold of contradictory information coming in via using posture therapy to send signals to the brain saying, "Hey, this is how I want the muscles to work." And the psychedelics make the brain more open to suggestion and able to conform to that new stimulus in a much more rapid manner. And that's because psychedelics have the ability to increase what is called neuroplasticity. So, neuroplasticity is the ability of your brain to grow new neural connections, grow new neurons. And psychedelics are, it's been well established by uh, numerous research studies at this point across numerous institutions that psychedelics increase neuroplasticity, not just during the psychedelic experience, but during for several weeks afterwards. It's called the neuroplastic window. Your brain is creating new connections and creating new neurons at an increased rate as compared to usual. Our brains are always changing, but psychedelics make it so the brain can change faster, can rewire itself faster. That's why my sign there, it says chronic pain rewired, right? Chronic pain rewired, because we are using psychedelics to rewire the brain in order to achieve these breakthrough results. So I have not received any questions on the chat. If you have questions, please do post them there. And I'll give just a few more minutes for that. But what else are you going to find in this book? One of the things that people may be curious about is if you're going to find value in this book if you're not into psychedelics. And the answer is, if you're into posture therapy, you're absolutely going to find value in this book. And if you're not into posture therapy, maybe you should be, because it's a great way to reduce tons of chronic pain problems without psychedelics. This book is, or the information in this book is for treatment resistant chronic pain, right? But the information about posture therapy in this book is, I cover chapters 2 through 7 have nothing to do with psychedelics. They're about posture therapy. Chapter 2 is an introduction to posture therapy. Chapter 3 is how to perform basic posture analysis. Chapter 4 is how to perform basic functional testing. Chapter 5 is how to categorize your posture and the implications of that. And Chapter 6 finally brings all that together in creating custom posture routines and an algorithm that you can use to develop posture routines on the fly. And then uh, I would, or in chapter 7, I go into the uh, things like the applications and contraindications of posture therapy. So, who is posture therapy good for? Who is maybe this not the right time for posture therapy, and other modalities should be pursued before going to posture therapy? Nuances like that. And then the rest of the book, chapters 1 and then chapters 8, 9, and 10 are all about psychedelics. And chapter 10 is the longest chapter in the book. It is all about a facilitation protocol for that is a facilitation protocol for performing psychedelic assisted posture therapy, step by step, everything you need to know in order to, or everything that I like to think about when I'm facilitating a posturdelic session. So we have a question from, do psychedelics work on just specific parts of the brain? So there are a handful of receptors that psychedelics are known to work on primarily. And one type of receptor in particular that psychedelics work on in a particularly strong manner, which are serotonin 5-HT2A receptors. And these, psychedelics like psilocybin and DMT and LSD are very similar in structure to serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, which is responsible for lots of things in our body. And um, so psychedelics work on a number of serotonin receptors, in particular that 5-HT2A receptor. However, the cascading effects of how the psychedelics affect these receptors seem to affect essentially um, potentially any part of the brain. However, it seems that we can target which areas of the brain we want it to affect more by modulating what types of activities we engage in during the psychedelic experience. So, for instance, psychedelic therapy is can be great for or one of the things that we think one of the reasons we think that psychedelic therapy can be so great for things like depression or anxiety or PTSD is that the cascading effects of this increased neuroplasticity allow us to experience a past trauma, for instance, but we can think about that trauma without getting the flight or flight response. And really, there's more. There's fight, flight, fawn, freeze, and negotiate. Or there's actually more than just fight or flight. But you know, we can re-experience these past traumas without experiencing that increase and change in hormones and change in neurofunction associated with the past trauma. So instead of going into this downward spiral of catastrophic thoughts potentially after thinking about a past trauma, people are able to reframe it, and once they can start thinking about that past trauma without that elevated tensing up of their systems, that adrenal response and cortisol levels spiking, all these things, all of a sudden they can reframe and change how they think about that situation going forward and not be affected by it. And um, so psychedelics can affect parts of the brain related to that, and really the mechanism of action with how we would change body schema models is fairly similar to that. The brain, you know, when I take someone who has done many weeks or months or even years of posture therapy, I can take someone who's done, for instance, an exercise like the supine groin progressive stretch or the static back position, an exercise that someone has done thousands of times, and then take them into the psychedelic experience, have them go into that same position. And they might say something along the lines of, this is like the first time I've ever done it. I'm noticing things throughout my body that I've never experienced before. And one, that's because the mind body connection has been amplified to a large degree. So they are actually experiencing that the stimulus coming into their brain is able to come to the forefront of their consciousness a lot easier in some cases. So the mind body connection has been amplified, but also the uh, they are they're able to reframe how that exercise impacts their body within their conscious experience. And so now they're able to realize, oh wait, when I do this exercise, I actually have like an external rotation in my femur here that I shouldn't have, and I need to work on correcting that. Right. So it can give them new perspectives on things that they've done hundreds or thousands of times simply by having this increased ability to process more sensory information while doing that same exercise that they're so accustomed to. So there are tons of benefits to doing this type of therapy for people who are good candidates for it. And that's part of the information. These contradictions, applications, and drug interactions of psychedelics. That's, of course, a big topic I cover in chapter 10 of this book. Other topics I cover in chapter 10 in regards to facilitation are things like set and setting, of course, and integration. Those are topics that every psychedelic, everyone practicing psychedelic should be concerned with. However, or postradelic facilitation goes far beyond setting and integration. We are also very concerned with the preparation going into it in terms of making sure that the person knows many exercises, or as many exercises as possible, going into the postradelic ceremony, because that allows them to do more exercises and get more done in that space, right? It opens up the possibilities. But we also need to be concerned with training a trip sitter. This isn't something you should ever do alone. And ideally, you should be doing it with professional facilitation. Um, all topics that I cover in the book. However, we're also going to be looking at metaphysical considerations. We're also going to be talking about dietary considerations. We're talking about sourcing psychedelics. We're talking about dosage. So there is a lot that goes into doing this type of therapy in a safe, effective manner. Not seeing any other questions come in at this point, so I suppose that'll do it for right now. And um, well, I'll give another minute or two for the last call for questions, actually, I guess. Um, and let's see, what else can we talk about while I'm waiting for this little last call for questions? One of the things that I think I would like to touch on, those chapters 2 through 7 that aren't about psychedelics. Though that information is a lot of the kind of stuff that a lot of the information I wish I had access to when I was trying to learn posture therapy, both before I started my training to get certified as a posture therapist and before I hired a posture therapist to start helping me. Uh, a lot of the information in those chapters is the type of stuff that I would have liked to know long before I was introduced to psychedelics, long before all that type of stuff. Um, another question is, how long does it take to get ready for the psychedelic trip? So in the general guideline, I suggest is about 6 weeks of standard posture therapy prior to going into the psychedelic experience. So there's a few reasons for that. One reason is perhaps the most practical reason, like I've already touched on, is that you need to know these exercises before you're in this altered state of consciousness, so that you are able to do these exercises like second nature, and we're not wasting time with me instructing how to perform an exercise, or God forbid, trying to use a YouTube video or something on your phone to uh, to learn an exercise while you're on mushrooms. That would be a terrible experience. At least for me, that would not be a good experience. And so the other reason for that is that, relating back to these body schema models. Now, body schema models, like I said, the brain is always trying to enforce the models that it thinks are the proper models. Now, it has not just one set of models. It has the set of models that it has in the foreground here, but it has lots of background models too. Models that it accrued when you rolled your ankle in sixth grade and you had to learn how to walk for a couple months with a roll in your ankle. Your brain learned how to do that. And then once the injury healed and you started walking normally again, in most cases, most people will start walking normally again, hopefully. And if not, they need posture therapy or physical rehabilitation. And then your brain switches to the model that is appropriate for when you're not injured, right? So that's how things are supposed to go. You're supposed to have these backup models, and then they can switch places when needed. But if they're not switching places when needed, or if the dysfunctional model has been present for such a long time that the brain is kind of the circuits for those old models have fallen into disrepair, I guess. And um, the what we're doing in those 6 weeks of standard posture therapy leading up to the psychedelic ceremony is, you can think of it like a covert ops team going behind enemy lines and like building some type of infrastructure, right? Every time we're doing these posture therapies, these posture therapy sessions before the psychedelic experience, we are activating these neural circuits that, like, hey, this is how the body's supposed to work, but they're not staying activated permanently. They're getting activated and then kind of fading away again, right? And every time we do them, hopefully they get activated a little more, they get a little stronger. So in the background, we're kind of building this scaffolding or this infrastructure of the models that we want to become the primary models. And then throughout the psychedelic ceremony, we're doing this kind of switcheroo where we take the background models and make them the primary models. At least that's the goal of the ceremony. Um, so one more question here. It says, I am kind of leery of doing psychedelics. Do you have any references you could link so I can learn more? So absolutely. One thing I could put in the comments here, I'll be out of frame for a moment, but I can, places like, it's www.psychedelicsandpain.org. So I just put up a link to psychedelicsandpain.org. Psychedelicsandpain.org is it's a organization for advancing psychedelic therapies for chronic pain, for all forms of chronic pain. And they have a great database where there's over 70 studies, I think there's 72 or 73 studies in their database. Last I checked, over 50 of those are relating primarily to chronic pain disorders, and the remaining 20 plus of those studies are relating to chronic illnesses such as autoimmune disorders and things along those lines. So we are there's lots of information in terms of like the scientific research backing up various ways that psychedelics can be useful for chronic pain. If you're wanting more information about how to use psychedelics safely, well, my book is going to be a great one great resource in terms of specifically learning how to use psychedelics safely for this type of therapy. So the way that you want to use psychedelics is going to be dependent on what you're doing with these substances. I don't use as large doses as standard psychedelic assisted therapy for mental health. The starting doses for this type of therapy are actually much lower. So that is, or than where most people start. This is uh, because we are incorporating so much physical movement into the experience, we're typically going for somewhat lower doses. So that's one reason to mitigate some of the leeriness of approaching psychedelics, or one bit of information that can help with that. And if you're wanting more information about the safety beyond my book, or if you're wanting to, the book isn't out until June 4th. So if you're wanting to get that information sooner, I would recommend places like maps.org. I can put that in the chat as well, maps.org. And they'll have great resources for getting for learning more about the safety and efficacy of these substances. Primarily, they'll be mostly concerned with ecstasy or MDMA at this point. However, and the let's see, there are a number of other organizations that can help with learning. I believe Psychedelic Medicine Association is a good resource for looking up things along those lines. Um, but the big thing you're going to want to make sure you're doing is following advice from people who have actually taking the psychedelics, in my opinion, is one one thing that not that's not a sufficient requirement, but it is a necessary one, in my opinion. Um, let's see. Any other questions? I'll have one last call. I see we have six people online now. So if any of you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I I meant to have my Twitter feed open too. I checked shortly before this. I didn't get any questions on Twitter before, but I did want to check that. So if you posted a question on Twitter since I started the live stream, sorry I didn't get to it. Uh, and let's see. One last bit that we might be useful to discuss right now is how using psychedelics for chronic pain isn't actually a new idea. And in chapter one, I provide a brief history of the research that has gone into applications towards chronic pain for psychedelics. And we'll find that the first research into psychedelics for chronic pain was actually conducted in the 1920s, published in 1930 by Julius Sador. I'm probably butchering his name. But that was a study about using mescaline for mescaline, which is the primary active psychedelic in peyote cactus or San Pedro cactus or wachuma. Um, and after World War One, phantom limb was a huge problem, and so they were willing to, I guess, get a little more creative with looking for solutions. And this idea of psychedelics modifying body schema goes back to really that study is when we started to realize, hey, someone's experiencing pain in a limb that isn't there anymore. Why might that be? And then they gave them mescaline and find out, hey, wait, this seemed to help. Well, why might mescaline help? And then later there was in the 1960s, a team from Japan studied phantom limb phenomena using LSD, and they also found, while the study was small in scale, it was a pilot study, but he found, hey, this seemed to help. I think 5 out of the 6 people with phantom limb pain experienced significant reductions or complete remission, even after just 1 to 2 small small doses of LSD. These are 50 microgram doses, so that's not a big dose of LSD. Um, it's kind of similar to the relative dosage. That's actually 50 milligrams is what I recommend someone start with if they want to use LSD for this type of therapy, or around 50 milligrams is probably a good starting place for most people. Right. So uh, the they also noted, hey, there's something going on with body schema, with how the brain is processing how it thinks the body is supposed to be configured, right? And so we realized that psychedelics were making changes there back then, but then of course the Controlled Substances Act and psychedelic research was shut down, all that type of stuff. So this idea of using psychedelics for chronic pain is not new. This idea of using psychedelics to modify body schema models is not new. I'm just approaching it with a different tool because posture therapy is already great for modifying body schema models. It just makes sense that we should try pairing it with something that makes it easier to change these these body schema models. Um, let's see. So we've been going for a half hour now. I still see there are 6 people on the stream. Um, not received any more questions at this point, but um, so I'll just start doing a little outro, and unless I get another question. And the book is Psychedelics, Chronic Pain, and the Posterdelic Hypothesis. The release date for this book is June 4th. It'll be available on ebook, paperback, and hardcover. I Anticipate doing some type of sale in the first few days or first several days of release. The normal price for the ebook will be $9.99. The price for the paperback edition that I have here will be $17.99, and I believe the hardcover edition is $28.99. Um, just being transparent with my pricing, I've priced it so that I get about the same commission regardless of which version you buy. I've just tried, so I've kept them as affordable as I possibly can, and let's see. I think that's about it. If you have, I do anticipate doing at least one or two more live streams like this for the book before it comes out. If you want to learn more, follow me on X, on Instagram, on Facebook. You know, all the big socials. I'm on there, and most of them you'll find me as Posture Monster John. I think TikTok is the only one where it's Chronic Pain Rewired, but I don't really use that one much. And that's it. Hope you have a great weekend.